When Lisa told me she was joining a weekend writing workshop, I thought nothing of it. She always loved storytelling, and I admired that about her. But something felt off. Her enthusiasm seemed forced. She had never taken an interest in fiction before, yet suddenly she was eager to spend entire weekends away, honing her craft. Then there were the messages, small, subtle signs that something wasn't right. A chuckle at a text she wouldn't show me, the way she angled her phone away, the vague descriptions of her workshop peers. I told myself I was overthinking it, but the doubt festered. So, I hired a private investigator. Chapter 2. The Paper Trail Mason. Reed was the kind of PI you'd find in a noir film, sharp, discreet, and efficient. I expected it to take weeks to get anything concrete, but by the following weekend, he had already gathered a folder thick enough to stop a bullet. "You're not gonna like this," he said, sliding the folder across the table. Inside were pictures. Lisa with a man. Not just any man, a fellow writer from her workshop. He was younger than me, rugged in a way that suggested he probably spent more time in bookstores than in boardrooms. The two of them sitting close in a cafe, leaning in, touching hands. A hotel receipt. I swallowed hard. How long? At least 3 months. Every workshop weekend, same pattern. And there's one more thing, Mason added, hesitating. It's not just an affair, she's writing about it. My head snapped up. What? Her manuscript, he continued. She's writing a story, loosely based on real events. Her version, anyway. The protagonist is a woman in a loveless marriage, finding passion with someone else. I clenched my fists. The betrayal wasn't just physical. It was inked into pages, immortalized in fiction. Chapter 3. The final chapter, I spent the next week in a haze. Lisa was oblivious, still spinning her lies, still leaving every Saturday morning with a kiss on my cheek and a bag full of notebooks. I needed a plan. That Saturday, I followed her to the workshop, staying just out of sight. Mason had already confirmed that her lover would be there. I had no intention of making a scene. Instead, I had something better. While Lisa sat at her table, passionately reading an excerpt from her novel to the group, I stepped into the back of the room. And then she realized finally that love wasn't a prison. It was a choice. She chose him. Lisa's voice was thick with emotion, lost in her own story. The room erupted in polite applause. That's when I clapped, too. Lisa's head snapped up. She paled. I stepped forward, holding up a copy of her manuscript. I have to say, it's an interesting read. Dead silence. The younger man, her inspiration, shifted uncomfortably. The rest of the group glanced between us, sensing something real unfolding before their eyes. Lisa stammered, "James, what are you—" I cut her off, flipping to the last page of her story. "The ending," I mused. "It's missing something, don't you think?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out the hotel receipts, the photos Mason had taken. Lisa gasped. Her lover stiffened. I laid them on the table. "Here's a plot twist for you, darling. You weren't the only one writing a story." With that, I turned and walked out, leaving behind a stunned audience, a guilty wife, and an ending she never saw coming. Lisa didn't come home that night. Not that I expected her to. I sat in my office, drinking whiskey and staring at the manuscript on my desk. Her words felt like knives. The way she painted our marriage as cold, lifeless, a cage. The way she made him seem like her savior. I flipped through the pages, searching for answers in the fiction she had spun. And then I saw it. A detail that didn't fit. A passage where her protagonist, a woman trapped in a passionless marriage, writes letters she never intends to send. Love letters, confessions, secrets. Lisa never mentioned writing letters before. But the way she described them, the way her protagonist hid them, it felt real, too real. And suddenly, I had a new mystery to solve. Chapter 5. The hidden drafts. The next morning, I tore through the house. I checked her desk drawers. Nothing. Her closet. Just clothes and perfume. But then I remembered. Lisa had an old wooden jewelry box, something her grandmother had given her. She kept it on the top shelf of her wardrobe. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside, beneath a pile of tangled necklaces and forgotten earrings, were folded pieces of paper. Letters. I unfolded the first one. James, I don't know how to tell you this, so I won't. But I feel like I'm disappearing, like I'm living someone else's life. I love you, but I think I love who I was before you more. The second letter was worse. I thought it was just excitement at first, a silly crush. But when I'm with him, I feel like myself again. Not a wife, not someone's responsibility, just me. My pulse pounded in my ears. And then the final letter, the one she had written but never sent. By the time you read this, it will already be over. I've made my choice. Please don't hate me. The date at the bottom was next weekend. She hadn't left me yet. She was planning to. Chapter 6. The final draft, I could have confronted her. Could have begged, raged, thrown her out. Instead, I made a different choice. That night, I sent Mason one last job. Find out everything about her lover. Not just where he lived, but his past, his secrets. If Lisa was so intent on rewriting our life story, I was going to make sure she didn't like the ending. The next day, I called Lisa. Come home, I said. Let's talk. She hesitated. James, you owe me that much. Silence. Then, okay. She came home that evening, cautiously stepping inside like a thief returning to the scene of a crime. I was waiting at the dining table, her manuscript in front of me. You were going to leave, I said. It wasn't a question. Lisa swallowed hard. I slid the final letter toward her. You didn't send it? Why? Tears welled in her eyes. Because I was afraid. Because I didn't know if I was making a mistake. I nodded slowly. Then I pulled out my own stack of papers. I did some writing of my own. Her eyes darted to the folder, confusion knitting her brow. What is this? Your lover, I said calmly. His history, his relationships, his secrets. You think you're the first married woman he's done this with? You're not even the second. Lisa's breath hitched. He's done this before, I continued. Twice, actually. Both times he convinced a woman to leave her husband. Both times he left them within 6 months. I leaned forward. He likes the thrill, Lisa. The stolen moments. The secrecy. But once, the chase is over. He moves on. She looked at the papers, but she didn't pick them up. Her face crumbled, as if the fantasy had just cracked in half. I stood up, grabbing my coat. I won't tell you what to do. But if you're going to leave me for him, you should know the whole story first. And with that, I walked away, leaving her alone with the truth. Chapter 7. The ending. She never expected Lisa didn't leave. She tried to apologize, tried to explain, but I didn't care anymore. The damage was done. I moved out a week later. Filed for divorce the next month. As for her lover, Mason was right. He moved on before the ink was dry on our papers. Lisa sent me one last letter months later, long after everything had settled. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I wanted you to know you were right. About him, about everything. And I was wrong. You deserved better. She was right about that, because for the first time in a long time, I was finally writing my own story. And this time, I was the main character. Months passed. The divorce was finalized. I thought that would be the end of it. But life has a way of writing unexpected sequels. It started with a phone call. Mr. Carter? The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, cautious, speaking. This is Detective Alvarez with the NYPD. We need to ask you a few questions regarding Lisa Carter. My grip tightened on the phone. What about her? There was a long pause. Then, she's missing. I nearly dropped the phone. Chapter 8. The Vanishing Act Lisa had disappeared 3 days ago. No sign of forced entry, no struggle, no farewell letters, just gone. Her car was still in her driveway. Her phone was found in her apartment, carefully placed on her nightstand. Nothing stolen, no bank activity. It was as if she had simply stepped out of existence. The police asked if she had enemies, if she had been acting strangely, if I knew of anyone who might want to hurt her. I almost laughed. She was cheating on me for months, I told them. Maybe start there. The police already knew about the affair. What they didn't know was what I had learned afterward. Lisa's lover, Daniel Hartman, had disappeared too. Chapter 9. The plot thickens, I called Mason. I knew you'd call, he said. And you're not going to like what I found. Tell me. Your ex's boy toy? He's not who he says he is. My stomach tightened. Mason continued. His real name isn't Daniel Hartman, it's Owen Langley. And here's the fun part. He's got a history of conning women. Lisa wasn't just another affair, James. She was a mark. I felt cold. Explain. He doesn't just seduce married women. He drains them, money, assets, whatever he can get. Then he disappears. 2 women before Lisa. Same story. Both of them left their husbands for him. Both of them lost everything. Mind reeled. But Lisa wasn't rich. She didn't have anything for him to steal. Mason hesitated. That's what I thought too, until I checked her accounts. I blinked. Her accounts? She took out a loan 2 weeks before she disappeared. 50 grand. The money's gone. A cold realization settled over me. Lisa hadn't just left me for another man. She had walked straight into a trap. Chapter 10. The investigation. No one wanted. The police didn't seem particularly concerned. To them, it looked like a classic case of woman runs off with lover, regrets. It later. But I knew better. I started digging. Every piece of evidence Mason found painted the same picture. Lisa had been set up. Daniel, or Owen, had manipulated her into leaving, convinced her to take out the money, then vanished. The last confirmed sighting of them was at a motel outside the city. Security footage showed them checking in together. Only he checked out. Lisa never did. Chapter 11. The twist in the tale. It took weeks of searching, following paper trails, tracking down people who had crossed paths with Owen Langley. Then, finally, a break. A woman, a survivor, someone who had almost been Lisa. Her name was Claire. She had met Owen years ago. He had seduced her, convinced her to run away with him. Then one day, he told her he needed her to do something for him, take out a loan, just a small one, just to help them get on their feet. When the money was gone, so was he. But Claire had survived, and she had something else, a name. There's someone who helped him, she told me. A woman. I never saw her face, but I heard him talking to her. He called her the editor. My blood ran cold. Lisa had called herself that once. In her manuscript. A woman rewriting her own life, a woman erasing the parts she didn't like. I thought Lisa had been a victim. But now, I wasn't so sure. Chapter 12. The ending. No one expected. The police found Lisa's car abandoned near the Hudson River. Her bank account was empty. Her apartment was cleared out, but there was no body, no evidence of a crime, just a single sheet of paper left on her desk, a handwritten note with one simple sentence. Sometimes the best stories don't have an ending. Lisa hadn't just been conned. She had learned from the best, and this time, she had rewritten the ending in her favor. She had always been a storyteller. a woman obsessed with crafting narratives. Somewhere along the way, she'd stopped writing fiction and started writing her life. The manuscript, the affair, the letters she left behind, it was all part of a larger plot. And the worst part? I had no idea if she had been the victim or the mastermind. So I did the only thing I could. I hunted her down. Chapter 14. The Clues She Left Behind. Mason and I retraced every step she had taken. The money was gone, but financial trails always leave echoes. The motel was the last place she was seen. According to the receptionist, she had checked in under a fake name, Emily Clark, a new identity, a rebirth. But then Mason found something, a transaction, small, barely noticeable. A single purchase on a prepaid card made 2 days after she disappeared. A notebook. Lisa hadn't given up writing. She was documenting something, or someone. Chapter 15. The Woman in the Cafe Mason Traced. The purchase to a small bookstore in Boston, a place known for its cozy reading nooks and second-hand novels. We took the first flight out. I wasn't expecting to find her, but then there she was, Lisa, sitting in a corner booth, sipping black coffee, a notebook open in front of her. Her hair was different, shorter, dyed auburn, but I'd know her anywhere. For a second, I just watched. She wasn't running. She wasn't hiding. She was waiting for me. Chapter 16. The Truth. She never told. Lisa looked up as I slid into the booth across from her. "James," she said, as if we were old friends catching up. "You planned this," I said. It wasn't a question. She exhaled, setting her pen down. "Not all of it." I glanced at her notebook. Handwritten pages, the ink still fresh. My name was on the first line. "You were writing about me," I said. She nodded. "I knew you'd come looking. Mason had told me once that cheaters never change, that they always leave behind something, a pattern, a mistake, a tell. But Lisa wasn't a cheater. She was an author, and this was the sequel. Chapter 17. The Editor's Cut. "Did you kill him?" I asked. Lisa's expression didn't change. "Who?" I leaned in. "Owen, Daniel, whatever name he was using." She studied me for a moment, then smiled faintly. "What do you think?" I didn't answer, because I didn't know. Lisa had disappeared at the exact moment Owen did. His pattern was always the same. He drained women and left them broken. But this time, something was different. Lisa hadn't been broken. She had vanished with him. "Where is he?" I pressed. She picked up her coffee, took a slow sip. "Gone." "Gone where?" She tilted her head. "Does it matter?" My breath hitched. She wasn't denying it. "Lisa," I said slowly, "what did you do?" She tapped the cover of her notebook. "I wrote a better ending." I stared at her, feeling the weight of those words. Had she killed him? Framed him? Conned him the way he had conned others? I had chased Lisa across states, followed every clue, convinced she was in danger. But now, sitting across from her, I saw the truth. She had never been the damsel. She had been the author, and she had rewritten the story to ensure she wasn't the victim. Chapter 18. The Final Page. Lisa reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. She slid it across the table. "Take it." I hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a single key. "To what?" I asked. "You'll figure it out." Lisa stood, adjusting her coat. "Where are you going?" I asked. She smiled. "To start a new chapter." Then, without another word, she walked out of the cafe, disappearing into the crowd. I sat there for a long time, staring at the key. Lisa had always loved a good mystery, and this time she had left me with one. Epilogue. The ending I never saw. Coming, it took me a week to find out what the key was for. A storage unit in a quiet little town. Inside, there was nothing but a single manuscript, Lisa's final story. I opened it, my hands trembling as I read the first line. Once upon a time, a woman refused to be a victim, so she became something else instead. I read every word, and when I reached the last page, I finally understood. Lisa hadn't just rewritten the ending, she had made sure there was no sequel. All I had left was the manuscript she'd left behind, a cryptic story that blurred the line between reality and fiction. Every page felt like a confession wrapped in metaphor, daring me to decipher the truth. The protagonist was a woman. No. Surprise there, but she wasn't running from a bad marriage or a cheating heart. She was running from a crime, and the deeper I read, the more I realized Lisa wasn't just telling a story, she was telling her story. Chapter 20. The woman who knew too much Mason and I tore apart the manuscript, searching for anything that might explain what had really happened to Owen Langley. What if this isn't just a confession? Mason mused. What if it's a map? A map? That word stuck with me, because buried in one of Lisa's chapters was a small, almost throwaway detail, a character burying something deep in the woods behind, a cabin. Lisa and I had never owned a cabin, but Owen Langley had. I grabbed my phone and searched through Mason's files, scanning old addresses linked to Owen's alias. And there it was, a lake house in upstate New York, remote, secluded, the perfect place for a secret. Chapter 21. What lies beneath? We drove through the night, reaching the lake house just after dawn. It was abandoned, the front door hanging loose on rusted hinges. The inside smelled of dust and forgotten promises, but it was the backyard that held the real secret. Mason found it first, a patch of disturbed earth near the tree line. Someone had tried to cover it up, but the ground was still loose. We dug, and then we found him, Owen Langley, or at least what was left of him. Chapter 22. The editor's final draft. The police ruled it as a missing person case turned homicide. But there was no doubt in my mind. Lisa had planned every part of this. Owen had spent years conning women, manipulating them, abandoning them. But this time, he had picked the wrong mark. Lisa had always been a storyteller. She didn't just survive the story he tried to write for her. She rewrote it. And in her version, Owen Langley never got a happy ending. Chapter 23. The Last Letter. 2 months later, I received a letter. No return address, no name, just a single sheet of paper with 5 words. You finally solved the story. No apology, no regret, no explanation. Lisa wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was simply telling me that my part in her story was over. And as I burned the letter that night, watching the flames consume the last piece of her, I realized something. Maybe Lisa didn't disappear. Maybe she just finished the book. Lisa was gone. Owen was buried. The police closed the case without a suspect, ruling it an unsolved homicide. No fingerprints, no direct evidence. Just a con man who had finally run out of luck, but something about it still didn't sit right. Because Lisa didn't just disappear. She vanished perfectly. No loose ends, no mistakes, just a well-crafted exit, like the last chapter of a novel written by a meticulous hand. And yet, the letter. You finally solved the story. If she was truly free, if she had erased herself so well, why send it? Why let me know? Chapter 25. The unfinished draft Mason thought I was crazy for chasing shadows. You found her, you found him, you found the body, he said. Game over, man. Let her go. But I couldn't. Lisa had taught me something. Stories don't just end. There's always another chapter, another twist, another revelation waiting in the margins. And the more I read between the lines, the more I realized Lisa hadn't written her last chapter yet. She had left something unfinished. Chapter 26. The Tea. Missing chapter. I went back to Lisa's manuscript. Every page, every word. I read it over and over, searching for something I had missed. And then I found it. A single line buried deep in the text. A passage about her protagonist writing a final letter. A goodbye that wasn't really a goodbye. Some stories are meant to be rewritten, even after the last page is turned. I thought about that sentence for hours. What did she mean? Was she warning me, teasing me, or was she telling me where to find her? Chapter 27. The real ending. I went back to where it all started. Lisa's old writing workshop. The place where she first met Owen, where their affair had begun. The building was different now. A new class, a new instructor. But I wasn't looking for a workshop. I was looking for a writer. And I found her. Not Lisa, but a woman sitting in the back, scribbling in a notebook. Auburn hair, a thoughtful expression, and a name tag that read Emily Clark, Lisa's old alias. I sat down across from her, and she looked up. She wasn't Lisa, but she knew Lisa. I could see it in her eyes. She smiled faintly, as if she had been expecting me. Then she slid a small folded note across the table. I opened. James, you were always my best reader, but some stories aren't meant to be finished. Don't look for me again. I looked back up, ready to press for answers, but the woman was already gone. Chapter 28. A story. With no ending, Lisa had done the impossible. She had escaped completely, not just the law, not just her past. She had escaped her own story. No body, no trail, no closure, just a name in a notebook. A whisper of a woman who no longer existed. And I realized, for the first time in my life, I was holding a book with no final page. Lisa hadn't left a mystery for me to solve. She had left a legend, one that would never end. Lisa was gone, but she had left behind something far more dangerous than a body. An idea that she could disappear at will, that she could rewrite herself again and again, shedding identities like old drafts, leaving only whispers behind, and I wasn't the only one chasing her. Chapter 30. The man who came looking. It started with a phone call, an unfamiliar number. A voice I didn't recognize. Mr. Carter? Who's asking? A pause. Then, in a tone that sent a chill down my spine. We need to talk about Lisa. I should have hung up, but I didn't. Who is this? The man who's been looking for her a lot longer than you. Chapter 31. The ghosts in her wake. We met in a bar downtown, the kind where secrets stick to the walls like old cigarette smoke. The man was older, well-dressed, sharp eyes that missed nothing. He introduced himself as Vincent Gray, a private investigator. But not just any PI. Lisa wasn't the first person he had tracked. Do you know how many names she's used? He asked, stirring his drink. How many lives she's walked through? I didn't answer. He leaned forward. You think she disappeared after Owen? That was just the latest chapter. Lisa has been editing herself for years. I frowned. What do you mean? Vincent slid a folder across the table. I opened it and felt my stomach drop. Photos, records, Lisa. In San Francisco, under the name Julia Kendall. Lisa in Chicago as Margaret Lane. Lisa in New Orleans as Catherine Shaw. Each identity meticulously built. Each one abandoned just before things got complicated, and each time she had left behind a man like me, a man who thought he knew her, a man who was wrong. Chapter 32. The Woman Who Never Existed. Lisa Carter was never real, Vincent said. She's been changing her name for over a decade, reinventing herself, playing different roles. And every time someone gets hurt. Like Owen? I asked. Vincent gave a slow nod. Like Owen. But Owen was a con man, I argued. He was the predator. Was. He? Vincent asked. I froze. Tell me, James, who do you think taught her how to disappear? The realization hit like a gut punch. Lisa hadn't just escaped Owen. She had learned from him, perfected his game, and then, when she didn't need him anymore, she erased him. Chapter 33. The final hunt. Vincent had been tracking Lisa long before. I knew she existed, but not for revenge, for answers. You want to find her, I said. I need to find her, he corrected. Why? Vincent hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out an old photograph. A younger Lisa, smiling, holding a child. Her real name, Vincent said, was Eleanor Graves. The name meant nothing to me, but the picture did, because Lisa, Eleanor, wasn't alone in it. She was holding a baby. Who? I started, but Vincent cut me off. Her son, he said. My mind reeled. Lisa had a child, not had, Vincent said grimly. Has, and she's been running ever since. Chapter 34. The real story Lisa, or Eleanor, wasn't just a runaway. She was a mother on the run. From whom? I didn't know. But suddenly, her entire story looked different. The fake names, the abandoned lives, the disappearances. She wasn't just erasing herself. She was protecting someone else. And for the first time, I had to ask myself a question. Wasn't sure I wanted the answer to. Had Lisa been the villain of this story? Or had I been chasing the wrong narrative all along? Chapter 35. The next chapter begins. Vincent finished his drink and stood up. I'm going after her, he said, with or without you. I looked down at the photograph. Lisa, Eleanor, whatever her real name was. She had rewritten her life so many times, I had lost track of what was real. But one thing was clear. Her story wasn't over, and I had a choice. Turn the page or chase the ending. I looked up at Vincent and made my decision. Let's find her. Lisa, Eleanor, whatever her real name was, she had always been one step ahead. But this time we weren't following breadcrumbs. We were following something far more dangerous, her past. Vincent wasn't just a PI. He had a personal stake in this. You didn't just track her, I said as we drove through the dimly lit streets. You knew her, didn't you? His grip tightened on the steering wheel. I knew of her, more than you ever did. Tell me, I said. He exhaled. Lisa wasn't just running from Owen, and she wasn't just running from her past identities. She was running from someone else. I turned to him. Who? Vincent's jaw clenched. The father of her child. The air between us went still. Chapter 37. The man in the dark Lisa had never once mentioned a child. Never once let slip that there was another person in the picture. If she was running from the child's father, that meant one of two things. He was dangerous. He was still looking for her. Who is he? I asked. Vincent didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pulled out another folder from his bag, tossing it onto my lap. I opened it, and my blood ran cold. A man's face stared back at me. Sharp features, cold eyes, a scar along his jaw, and a name that made my stomach twist into knots. Daniel, Owen Langley. Wait, I started, flipping through the documents. Owen Langley? Vincent gave a slow nod. Not just her lover, not just her con man, her child's father. My vision blurred as I tried to piece it together. Lisa hadn't been one of Owen's victims. She had been his partner. And before she ever met me, before she ever stepped into my life, she had been running from him. The affair, the betrayal, the murder. It had never been about love. It had been about survival. Chapter 38. the pieces come together. Vincent pulled the car to a stop outside a quiet, nondescript building, a storage facility. Before he died, Vincent said, Owen had money, stashed away, fake passports, identities, the kind of things a man like him needed to disappear. And Lisa took it? She took everything, Vincent confirmed, and now I think she's trying to disappear one last time. The pieces clicked in my head. Lisa had been running from Owen for years, but when she finally killed him, she didn't. Stop running, because someone else was still out there, someone even worse. Chapter 39. The Real Threat. We stepped inside the storage unit, dust filling the air as Vincent pried open a locked case. Inside there were files, Lisa's files, fake names, bank accounts, passports, and then at the very bottom, a single photograph, a young boy no older than 7, dark eyes, a solemn expression, Lisa's son, and written in ink beneath the photo, "If you find this, run. He's coming." I looked up at Vincent, my pulse hammering. "This isn't just about Lisa," I whispered. "It's about her child." And then, before Vincent could answer, a sound outside, the sharp click of a gun being cocked. We weren't alone. Chapter 40. The final hunt begins. Voice cut through the silence. "Step out! Hands where I can see them!" Vincent and I exchanged a glance. Then, slowly, we stepped out of the storage unit, hands raised. A man stood at the entrance. Tall, broad shoulders, the same sharp features from the photograph, the same cold eyes. Lisa's past had caught up to her, and now it had caught up to us. Daniel Owen Langley wasn't dead, and he was here to finish the story his way. Daniel Langley, Lisa's former lover, the father of her child, the man she had been running from all along, and he was very much alive. His gun was steady, his eyes unreadable, but there was something worse in them than anger. There was control, like he had been expecting us. Vincent kept his hands raised. "You're supposed to be dead." Langley smirked. "Disappointed?" I swallowed hard. "Lisa killed you. We found your body." "You found a body," Langley corrected. "Not mine." It hit me then. Lisa hadn't just killed Owen Langley. She had killed someone else and used Owen's identity to cover her tracks, and somehow Daniel had known. He stepped closer, the dim light casting shadows across his face. "I'm only going to ask this once. Where is she?" Chapter 42. The man. With the wrong questions, Vincent stayed perfectly still. "We don't know." Langley studied him, then turned to me. I knew I had seconds to decide, lie, stall, or run. I went with stall. "Why do you care?" I asked. "You've been alive this whole time. You could have gone anywhere. Started over." Langley tilted his head. "She took something from me." "The money," Langley shook his head. "The boy." Chapter 43. A Mother's Secret. Vincent and I exchanged a glance. Lisa's son. The child she had been running for. "She never told you about him, did she?" Langley's voice was laced with quiet amusement. "Of course she didn't. She was always good at hiding things." I felt something twist in my gut. Lisa had rewritten her identity so many times, I had assumed. She was only protecting herself. But she had been protecting her son from his own father. Langley exhaled, almost nostalgic. She was supposed to disappear alone. That was the deal. But she broke it. She took him. My stomach churned. "And what? You're here to take him back?" Langley's expression darkened. "I'm here to finish what she started." Chapter 44. A loaded. Truth Vincent moved first. A flick of his wrist. Then a knife buried itself in Langley's arm. The gun went off. I dove behind a crate as the shot shattered the air, my pulse hammering. Langley staggered, clutching his wound, but he wasn't down. Vincent lunged, aiming for another strike, but Langley was fast. Even wounded, he sidestepped, grabbed Vincent by the collar, and slammed him against the wall. Another gunshot. This one missed by inches. I had to move. I grabbed the first thing I could, a rusted metal pipe, and swung. The impact sent Langley reeling. His grip loosened, just long enough for Vincent to drive his elbow into Langley's ribs. He hit the ground hard. His gun skidded across the floor. I moved fast, kicking it out of reach. Langley lay there, breathing hard, his wounded arm, slick with blood, but he wasn't panicking, he was smiling. "You think this ends with me?" he rasped. My breath was unsteady. "What the hell does that mean?" Langley chuckled darkly. "You still don't get it, do you?" He looked right at me. Lisa was never running from me. She was running from all of us. Chapter Y. 45. The others. The words sent ice down my spine. "Who else is looking for her?" I demanded. Langley's smirk deepened. "You think I was the only one she betrayed? The only one she stole from? There are others, James, and they won't stop until they find her." I wanted to call his bluff, but the way he said it, the certainty in his voice, made my blood turn cold. Lisa hadn't just outsmarted one man, she had outsmarted an entire network, and now they were coming. Langley exhaled, his amusement fading. "You don't have much time. You can either find her before they do." He leaned back, eyes gleaming. "Or watch her story end for good." Chapter 46. The next move, Vincent and I left Langley behind, alive, but wounded. We had bigger problems now. Lisa wasn't just running from her past. She was running from something far bigger than we ever imagined. And if we didn't find her soon, someone else would. Vincent started the car. "We need to move fast," I exhaled, gripping Lisa's last letter in my hands. Some stories aren't meant to be finished. Maybe not. But this wasn't just a story anymore. This was a race, and I wasn't about to lose. The night stretched long ahead of us as Vincent drove in tense silence. My mind raced. Lisa had always been a step ahead, always rewriting herself before anyone could catch her. But if Langley was telling the truth, she wasn't just running from him. She was running from all of them. "Who are these people?" I asked, breaking the silence. Vincent's hands tightened on the wheel. "Powerful. Dangerous. The kind of people you don't steal from and walk away. Lisa stole from them?" "Not just money," Vincent said. "Information, secrets, leverage. It's what kept her alive this long. But now she's out of time." I exhaled. "So where do we start?" Vincent didn't answer immediately. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out a burner phone. He handed it to me. "Call her." I hesitated. "What?" "You said she left you a letter," Vincent said. "That means she wants you to find her." I wasn't so sure. Lisa never did anything without a reason. If she had wanted to be found, she would have left a trail, not a warning. But I had no other choice. I dialed the last number I had for her. It rang twice, then someone picked up. But it wasn't Lisa. It was a child. "Hello?" A small, uncertain voice. My throat went dry. Lisa's son. Chapter 48. A voice from the past I swallowed hard. "Hey, buddy, is your mom there?" Silence, then a muffled sound, like someone grabbing the phone away. A woman's voice came on, sharp and panicked. "Who is this?" I knew that voice. "Lisa." "It's me," I said. "James." More silence. Then a shaky breath. "You shouldn't have called. Lisa, listen to me. Langley's alive." A pause. A quiet curse. "I know." I glanced at Vincent. "And he's not the only one looking for you." Lisa exhaled. "They found you, didn't they?" "Not just me," I said. "Vincent, too." At the mention of his name, Lisa's voice went tight. "You're working with him?" "He's the reason we're still alive," I said. Lisa, you have to tell me where you are. We can help you. No, she said immediately. No one can help me, James. It's too late for that. I gritted my teeth. Lisa, they know about your son. That did it. Her breath hitched, just slightly. A crack in the armor. Listen to me, I pressed. I don't care about the past. I don't care about the lies. But if you don't let us help you, they will find you. And they won't give you a second chance. A long silence. Then finally, New Orleans, she whispered. Warehouse District, midnight. Come alone. The line went dead. Chapter 49. The Betrayal We Didn't See. Coming. Vincent and I arrived in New Orleans just before midnight. The air was thick. With humidity, the streets nearly deserted. The warehouse Lisa had told me about was old, rusted, barely standing, and it reeked of a setup. You sure about this? Vincent asked. No, I admitted. But I don't have a choice. I stepped inside. The dim overhead lights flickered, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. Then I saw her, Lisa. She was standing near the center, dressed. In dark clothes, her auburn hair pulled back. She looked thinner, tired. But her eyes, those sharp, calculating eyes, were as dangerous as ever. And next to her, clutching her hand, was a small boy. Her son. My chest tightened. Lisa, you shouldn't have come, she said. I frowned. You called me. Lisa exhaled, glancing toward the shadows. No, James, I didn't. I barely had time to process her words before the click of a gun echoed behind me. Vincent stiffened. Slowly I turned and felt my stomach drop. Langley, alive, smiling, gun in hand, and he wasn't. Alone. Behind him, stepping out of the shadows, were two more men, suits, cold eyes. The kind of men who didn't ask questions. I had walked straight into a trap, and Lisa had known. Chapter 50. The Choice Langley's smirk was slow, satisfied. Well, look at this little reunion. I clenched my fists. Lisa, I had no choice, she said softly. They gave me an ultimatum. Either I turned myself in. She looked down at her son, eyes heavy with something unreadable. Or they took him. The weight of it crushed me. She hadn't betrayed me. She had saved him. Langley chuckled. Touching, really. But we all know how this ends. He turned to Lisa. Time's up. You come with us. The kid stays alive. Lisa was shaking, but her voice was steady. Promise me he won't be hurt. Langley's smile didn't reach his eyes. Scout's honor. I took a step forward. You don't have to do this. Lisa looked at me, and for the first time, I saw it. The exhaustion, the resignation. She had been running her entire life, and now she was finally out of moves. She gave me one last look, something sad and unspoken passing between us. Then she turned to Langley. Fine, she said. I'll go. Langley's grin widened. Smart girl. He raised his gun, and everything exploded into chaos. Chapter 51. The Last Rewrite Gunshots. Lisa moved first, grabbing her son and shoving him toward me. Run! She screamed. Vincent fired. One of Langley's men dropped. I grabbed the kid, shielding him as we ran. More shots. Chapter 53. The Silence. After the Storm. The night hung heavy in the air as I stood in the warehouse, Vincent beside me. Lisa was gone. The boy was safe. Langley and the others were dead. And yet something felt unsettlingly empty. I glanced at Vincent, who was watching me closely. We should leave, he said quietly, before anyone else shows up. But I couldn't move. Couldn't shake the feeling that this was all unfinished. Did you know, I finally asked, that she was going to do this? That she would disappear again? Vincent looked over at me, his face unreadable. I had a feeling, but I didn't know for sure. I turned away, looking at the spot where Lisa had stood. She said she wanted to be found. She left me a trail, a warning. She did, Vincent said. But she also knew that no matter what, she couldn't keep running forever. My mind flashed back to everything. The affair, the lies, the murder, the constant game of cat and mouse. Lisa had been so many things to me, a lover, a partner, a mystery. But above all, she had been a survivor. And when survival was all you knew, you didn't stop running until you found a place where you could finally be free. She didn't want to drag you down, Vincent said, reading my thoughts. She made the choice for herself. But that kid, he was the one thing she couldn't let go of. I nodded slowly. She saved him, I whispered. And I couldn't save her. Vincent placed a hand on my shoulder. You did what you could, James. You gave her a chance to make a choice. That's all anyone can do. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The weight of it all, the betrayal, the secrets, the endless chase, it was still too fresh. And yet, I knew that there was something I still had to do. There was one last part of this story I hadn't figured out. Chapter 54. The last piece, as we left the warehouse, I couldn't shake the feeling that Lisa had left me with a final message, a clue. A thread I hadn't followed yet. We walked in silence toward Vincent's car, the boy still clinging to me. He was barely 6 years old, but he had the same eyes as Lisa, dark, intelligent, aware of things no child should be. Do you know where your mom went? I asked him gently. He shook his head. She told me to stay with you. I frowned, confused. Stay with me? Why? The boy looked up at me, his gaze steady. She said you'd protect me. I felt a pang in my chest, but the words didn't feel like a child's promise. They felt like a message. My phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me from my thoughts. I pulled it out, seeing an unknown number. Without thinking, I answered. Hello? The voice on the other end was calm, but there was an edge of urgency. James. I froze. Who is this? The voice was familiar, but the words didn't match. Then, slowly, it clicked. It was Lisa. Lisa? I said, my heart racing. She laughed softly on the other end, the sound tinged with something close to relief. James, you're smarter than I gave you credit for. I was silent, my mind reeling. You wanted to find me, didn't you? She continued. You came all this way to save me, but you're not going to. You never could. Where are you? I demanded. Why are you calling me? You need to understand something, James, Lisa said quietly. I wasn't running from Langley. I wasn't running from the past. I was running from what I've become. I didn't understand. Lisa. Please, I begged. Where are you? You can't keep disappearing. But she didn't answer. Tell me where you are, and I'll come for you. I'll help you. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, my heart thumping in my chest. Chapter 55. The final decision, we returned to Vincent's car. The boy was quieter now, his tiny hand slipping into mine. His grip was firm. As we drove through the dark streets, my mind raced. Lisa's call. It didn't make sense. She was asking for help, but she didn't want to be found. I turned to Vincent. We're not done, are we? He glanced at me, his face grim. No, we're not. But if you want my advice, James, you should let it go. Let her go. She's chosen her path. Chosen? I echoed. You don't understand. She called me. She needs me. Vincent didn't respond immediately. Then, after a long silence, he said, People like Lisa don't need saving. They need freedom. And right now, that's what she's taken. I looked out the window. But at what cost? Vincent didn't answer. He didn't need to. because deep down, I knew. Lisa had done everything she could. She had saved her son. She had protected herself. And she had made the ultimate choice: to disappear, to cut all ties, to leave everything behind in order to build a future where the ghosts of her past would never find her again. But I still had to make a choice. I could keep chasing her, keep digging into the past. Or I could let it go, and for the first time, I knew which choice I had to make. Chapter 56. Letting Go Be. The time we reached the hotel, the boy had fallen asleep in my arms. I carried him to the room and laid him on the bed. His breathing was soft and steady. The days after Lisa's disappearance were a blur. The boy, whose name I'd learned was Noah, was surprisingly resilient for someone so young. He had inherited his mother's quiet intelligence, absorbing the world around him with a calm awareness. That unsettled me at times. Vincent and I set up a new life for him, a safe house in a small town far from the chaos. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Lisa was still out there, her presence lingering like a shadow. It wasn't just the unresolved questions, the mystery that still gnawed at me. It was the why. Why had she left so abruptly? Why hadn't she allowed herself to stay? There was a part of me that wanted to track her down, to uncover the truth. But as the days passed, I started to realize something. Maybe I didn't need the answers. Maybe in the end, Lisa had done what she thought was best. For herself, for her son, for me. Noah adjusted to his new life quicker than I expected. He didn't ask about Lisa often, and when he did, his questions were simple, almost childlike. "Where's Mom? Why can't she be here?" I had no answers for him, no real answers, only empty promises that she'd be back soon, that she loved him, that she would always be watching over him. Chapter 58. A family of 2 weeks turned into months, and eventually Noah became a fixture in my life. I took care of him, helped him with schoolwork, taught him things I never imagined I'd be teaching someone. As much as I missed Lisa, as much as the void she left gnawed at me, there was something healing about being there for Noah. One afternoon, after a long day of lessons, Noah sat down with a sketch pad in front of me. He had started drawing more, often his quiet nature bleeding onto the paper. "What are you drawing?" I asked, leaning over his shoulder. He didn't answer at first, his small hand moving quickly over the page. Then, with a flourish, he turned the sketch pad toward me. It was a picture of Lisa. She was standing under a tree, smiling, the wind lifting her hair. There was a peace to the way Noah had drawn her, like he had captured a moment of her being. Truly alive. Not the woman I had known. Always hiding, always running. I stared at it for a long time. "She's beautiful, huh?" Noah said softly, his eyes never leaving the picture. "Yeah," I replied, my voice tight. "She was." Noah looked up at me then, his expression serious. "She's still watching, right?" My heart twisted. "Yeah, Noah. She's still watching." He smiled, satisfied, then turned his attention back to the picture. I wasn't sure if I could ever fully understand the complexities of what had happened between Lisa, Langley, and the others. There were still so many unanswered questions, so many things left unsaid. But in that moment, as Noah continued to sketch and I sat beside him, I understood something much more important. The need for closure wasn't just about solving mysteries. It was about finding peace in the things we couldn't control. Chapter 59. The unexpected Khaled was nearly midnight when my phone rang, its shrill tone pulling me from a deep sleep. I glanced at the screen. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I needed to. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was hushed, urgent. "James," the voice said. "It's me." My heart stopped. It was Lisa. I stood up, trying to steady my breathing. "Where are you?" I asked, voice trembling. "Listen, James. I can't talk for long," Lisa said. "They're still looking for me. I don't know how long I have before they come for me." My mind spun. "Who? What's going on? Are you safe?" There was a long pause before she spoke again. "I'm safe. For now. But I can't stay where I am. I need you to do something for me. For Noah." I felt the weight of her words settle in. "What do you need?" "I need you to give him this," Lisa said, her voice thick with emotion. "A piece of me that he can carry with him. It's a key. He's going to need it someday, James. And when the time comes, you'll know what to do." "A key?" I asked, confused. "Yes, it's the only thing that will keep him safe. I promise you." I stood frozen, the weight of her request sinking in. I couldn't see her. I couldn't touch her. But this key was something real, something I could hold on to. "Where is it?" I asked, my voice hoarse. Lisa hesitated. "I can't tell. You. Not yet. But it's in a place you'll never think to look. Just remember, when the time comes, you'll understand." And then, just as quickly as she had called, the line went dead. Chapter 60. The Last Clue. The days that followed were a haze of uncertainty. Lisa's call had sent my mind spinning. What did she mean by the key? What had she left behind for Noah? Thought back to everything I knew about her. The secrets, the lies, the stories she'd told me. There had always been something she was hiding. And now I knew she had left one last piece behind. A final clue to protect her son. I searched the house, the old boxes of her belongings, even the places I thought I'd already checked. But I found nothing. The days after Lisa's cryptic call passed with a heavy weight on my chest. Noah seemed to sense that something had shifted, even if he couldn't understand it. He grew quieter, more thoughtful, his usual curiosity replaced by an air of cautious reflection. I didn't know how to explain to him what was happening. How could I? I wasn't sure myself. The notebook was all I had. It was both a lifeline and a dead end. The key is with him. Lisa had made it so simple, yet so impossible to decipher. I felt like I was on the edge of a cliff, knowing I had to jump, but too afraid to move. I spent the next few days going through every single thing in the house that might hold meaning. Photos, books, letters, keepsakes. Yet nothing seemed to click. Each time I thought I'd found something, the feeling that it wasn't quite right gnawed at me. I could almost hear Lisa's voice in my head, reminding me that the key was never a physical object. It was something within Noah, something only he could unlock when the time was right. I looked at him differently now, his small, quiet presence, a puzzle I wasn't sure how to solve. How could a 6-year-old boy hold the key to a mystery so vast, so intricate, so dangerous? Then one evening, as I was cleaning the kitchen, I heard Noah's voice in the hallway. "James?" he asked softly. "Can I talk to you?" I froze, feeling the tension I had been carrying for days tighten in my chest. I nodded, my voice caught in my throat. "Of course, Noah. Come here." He stepped into the kitchen, holding something small and silver in his hand. It was an old key, worn, rusted in places, but undeniably real. My heart skipped a beat as I stared at it. "I found it," Noah said, his voice quiet but firm. "It was under my bed, in the little box where I keep my things." I took the key from his hand slowly, my fingers trembling. It felt like the world had shifted under my feet. This was it, the key, the one Lisa had left for him. And now, Noah had found it. But what was it for? "Where did you find it, Noah?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. Noah looked up at me, his expression serious. It was hidden, like a secret. I didn't know it was there, but I think it's important. Mom told me to keep it safe. I swallowed hard, the weight of the moment pressing down on me. You did the right thing, Noah. You kept it safe. But the question still hung in the air like a storm cloud. What now? Chapter 63. The Hidden Door. The night passed uneasily. I couldn't sleep, my mind racing with possibilities. The key, was it for a safe deposit box? A secret location? A hidden message? I woke up early the next morning, the light of dawn just beginning to creep through the blinds. Noah was already awake, sitting on the couch, staring at the key in his hands as if it held all the answers. I couldn't delay any longer. I had to find out what this key opened, and I had a growing sense that it wasn't something simple like a box or a drawer. It felt like the key to something deeper, something that could tie back to Lisa's past and the reasons she had disappeared in the first place. I walked over to the old house and began searching again, this time focusing not just on obvious places, but on places that felt hidden, places that Lisa had always kept to herself. I went into the attic where we had stored her belongings after her disappearance. There, I found an old trunk covered in dust. It was locked, its brass lock, old and tarnished, but it was clearly untouched for years. I knelt down, the key in my hand, and felt a surge of certainty that this was it. I inserted the key into the lock, feeling the slight resistance as it turned. The trunk creaked open, revealing a stack of old papers, folders, and a few photographs. But what caught my eye was a small wooden box sitting in the corner of the trunk. It was carved with delicate symbols, and it had the same worn look as the key. I lifted the box carefully and opened it, my heart pounding in my chest. Inside was a single piece of paper, folded neatly, as if waiting for me. The handwriting on it was unmistakable. Lisa's. "James," it began, the words scrawled with urgency. "If you are reading this, then I have already made the hardest choice of my life. I chose to protect Noah, to keep him safe from those who would use him for their own gain. There is something inside him, something that they want. I don't know how to explain it, but you must trust me on this. You are the only one who can protect him now. Keep the key safe. It's the only way to unlock his future. If they come for him, you must leave. You must run with him. There are people in this world who will stop at nothing to get what they want, but they don't know what Noah truly is. They never will. I love you, always." Lisa, my hands shook as I reread the note. There was so much here, so much I didn't understand. But the message was clear. Noah was the key. And the people who had been chasing Lisa, they weren't done. They would keep looking for him. We left the house behind, walking into the cold embrace of the night. The moon hung high in the sky, casting a pale, silvery light on the empty streets. I tried not to think about what we were leaving, our lives, our pasts, everything I once believed to be true. Now, the only thing that mattered was Noah. We climbed into the car, the engine sputtering to life with a hesitant cough. I pulled away from the house slowly, trying not to look back. The road ahead was uncertain, but there was no turning back now. Noah sat quietly in the back seat, his small figure barely visible in the dim glow of the dashboard lights. I could tell he was scared, but he wasn't crying. He was just silent. "Where are we going?" he asked after a long pause, his voice small but steady. I glanced in the rearview mirror, meeting his eyes in the reflection. "I don't know yet, buddy, but I promise you, we're going to be safe." He didn't respond, but I could see the quiet trust in his eyes. It broke my heart. The road stretched out before us, endless and empty. I wasn't sure where we were going, but instinct told me to keep moving. We couldn't stop. Not yet. Chapter 66. The strangers by dawn, we had driven hundreds of miles. The landscape around us was unfamiliar. Endless plains, small towns that seemed to melt into the horizon. I pulled into a secluded motel in a town that didn't even have a name on the sign. It was a place you didn't remember, a place you only passed through. The room was small and cold, but it had a bed and a lock on the door. I made Noah sit down on the bed while I checked the locks, the windows, and every possible escape route. It was a habit I'd formed over the last few days, never leaving anything to chance. As I sat down beside him, Noah looked up at me with a serious expression. "Do you think Mom is still watching us?" I couldn't bring myself to lie. "I don't." "No, buddy. But wherever she is, I know she's thinking about you." He nodded thoughtfully, then crawled into bed and curled up under the thin covers. It wasn't long before he was asleep, but I remained wide awake, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. It was too quiet, too still. Every passing car, every shadow, every unfamiliar face made my nerves spike. I couldn't relax. I couldn't trust anything anymore. Suddenly, a knock at the door shattered the stillness. I froze, my hand instinctively going to the gun I'd hidden in my jacket. The knock came again, more insistent this time. I crept toward the door, peering through the peephole. Two men stood outside, their faces obscured by hoods. They looked familiar. I couldn't place them, but I knew they weren't here for a friendly visit. I stepped back from the door, heart racing. My mind raced through options, none of them good. I had no choice. I had to protect Noah. I whispered urgently to him, "Stay in the corner, Noah, don't make a sound." He nodded, his eyes wide with fear, but he obeyed. I approached the door cautiously, slipping the safety off the gun in my jacket. I opened the door just a crack, enough to speak, but not enough to let them inside. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice steady but firm. One of the men spoke, his voice smooth and cold. "We're looking for someone. You wouldn't happen to have seen a woman named Lisa, would you?" I hesitated, my pulse hammering in my throat. Lisa. They were looking for her. And now, they were here for Noah. I took a deep breath, steadying my nerves. "I don't know what you're talking about." The man outside paused, then spoke again, his tone more insistent. "We know who you are, and we know what you're carrying. Don't make this harder than it has to be." I could feel the pressure mounting in my chest. My hand tightened on the gun. I didn't know who these men were, but I wasn't going to let them take Noah. There was a rustle outside the door, footsteps, a slight shuffle. And then, just as quickly as they'd come, the men were gone. I waited for a moment, my ear pressed against the door, but the silence stretched on. They were gone. For now. I locked the door again and turned back to Noah, who was still in the corner, wide-eyed and trembling. "It's okay, buddy. They're gone," I said, trying to calm my own racing heart. Noah didn't answer. He just stared at me with those wide, innocent eyes. I didn't know how long I could keep running, how long I could protect him. But one thing was clear. They were out there, and they wouldn't stop until they found us. Chapter 67. The Chase Tightens. The following days were a blur. We stayed on the move, driving through back roads, changing motels every night, never staying. In one place too long. Every shadow felt like a threat, every unfamiliar face a potential danger. I didn't trust anyone anymore, not even myself. But Noah remained my anchor. Through it all, he was the only constant. His quiet presence was both a comfort and a reminder of everything I had to lose. As the days passed, the constant fear that someone was watching us began to erode my sense of security. I knew we couldn't keep running forever. It wasn't just the danger. Noah was becoming anxious, restless. He hadn't spoken much since. The diner incident, his eyes constantly darting to the windows, the door, the shadows that seemed to lurk just beyond the edges of our vision. We couldn't stay in this limbo forever. I needed a plan. But to do that, I needed help. Late one night, as I sat on the edge of the bed, my mind racing, a thought occurred to me. A name. A person from Lisa's past. Someone who might know more about the mysterious forces after us. Pulled out my phone and hesitated for a moment. Should I call? Was it too risky? But I had no choice. Lisa had mentioned this person once in passing as a safe contact. She had said if we were ever in danger, we could turn to them. This person had the resources and connections to help us get off the grid. They could provide the protection we so desperately needed. I took a deep breath and dialed the number. The phone rang twice before a gravelly voice answered. "Who is this?" "Tom," I said, my voice steady despite the pounding of my heart. "It's James. I need your help." There was a long pause. Then the voice came back, quieter now but still stern. "James? I thought you were out of this game. What do you need?" I could hear the skepticism in his tone. Tom had been involved in things Lisa had wanted to leave behind, things I had no interest in. But he was a means to an end. "I'm not asking for favors, Tom," I said, trying to keep my voice firm. "I'm asking for protection. They're after me. They're after Noah." The line was silent for a long moment. I could almost hear Tom considering his options. "You sure you want to bring this into the open? People like us, we don't get out of things that easily." I clenched my fists, trying to keep my temper in check. "I don't have a choice. Noah's in danger. They're getting closer every day. I need you to help me keep him safe." Tom sighed, the sound heavy with years of regret and experience. "All right, I'll get in touch with some people. You've got one shot at this, James. Don't waste it." I ended the call, my heart still racing. This was it, the moment of truth. If Tom was serious, if his people could be trusted, we could finally stop running, at least for a while, but if not, I couldn't afford to think about the alternative. Chapter 9. The Price of Safety. The next morning, Tom's people made contact. I was instructed to meet them at a remote location just outside of town, a rundown cabin by a small lake, far enough from civilization to avoid prying eyes. I didn't know what to expect, but my gut told me this was my only shot at securing a future for Noah. I packed quickly, not taking any chances. Noah, still quiet and withdrawn, followed me without a word, sensing the gravity of the situation. As we arrived at the cabin, I noticed two things immediately: the lack of any obvious security and the two black SUVs parked just beyond the tree line. Not reassuring. I approached cautiously, Noah's small hand clutched tightly in mine. As we stepped inside, a man I didn't recognize greeted us. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a calmness that unsettled me. His eyes were sharp, calculating, but not unfriendly. "James," he said with a nod, his voice smooth. "We've been expecting you. I'm Peter. This is my team." I glanced around. There were 3 others in the room, all armed, all alert. My hand instinctively went to the concealed gun at my side, but I forced myself to relax. These were Tom's people. I had no choice but to trust them, for now. "Where's Noah?" I asked, looking around. Peter nodded toward a chair in the corner, where Noah had already taken a seat. He was staring out the window, his small figure dwarfed by the enormity of the room. "Don't worry," Peter said, his tone softening just a little. "We're not here to hurt anyone." I wanted to believe him, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the walls were closing in. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice tight with suspicion. Peter gestured for me to sit, and I hesitated before doing so. "We'll keep you and your son safe. But there's a price. You'll have to help us with something." I raised an eyebrow, my heart sinking. What kind of something? Peter's eyes narrowed. You've seen the people after you, the ones who've been tracking Lisa. They want something powerful, and they'll stop at nothing to get it. We have information that can help us stop them, but we need your help. We need you to get access to something they're hiding. I leaned forward, my mind racing. What are you talking about? Peter hesitated for a moment before speaking again, his voice low. There's a file, a dossier. It contains everything about Lisa, about her connections, and about what Noah really is. It's in a secure facility. We've tried to get it before. The plan was simple. Too simple. I couldn't help but feel the weight of everything on my shoulders as I stood in front of the makeshift map Peter had laid out for me. The secure facility was an hour outside of the town, hidden in the woods, surrounded by barbed wire and cameras. But there was a blind spot, a small window of opportunity when the guards switched shifts. It was our only chance. Peter's team had given me the equipment I needed: disguises, false IDs, and a set of lockpicks. I wasn't a professional, but I had learned a thing or two over the years. And right now, I didn't have time to second-guess myself. I adjusted my jacket and checked the gun concealed in my waistband. The air felt heavy, pressing in on me, as if the very world was holding its breath. Noah was asleep in the back of the cabin. He had no idea what was going on. He didn't need to. This was for him. Everything I was doing was for him. Peter had assured me that once I had the file, I would have a way out. But no plan ever goes perfectly. And the closer I got to the mission, the more I realized how much I was risking. I'll be back before dawn, I said quietly to Peter as I adjusted the strap on my bag. If I don't make it, don't. Even say it, he interrupted, his voice low and serious. You'll make it. Just do your part, and we'll do ours. I nodded and turned toward the door. But before I could open it, Peter's hand shot out, stopping me. James. Watch your back. There's more going on here than you know. I'm not sure how deep the rabbit hole goes, but it's a lot deeper than you think. These people won't stop at the file. They want everything. I looked him square in the eye, feeling the weight of his warning. I'll keep that in mind. With a deep breath, I stepped out into the cool night air, the full moon casting long shadows across the ground. Chapter 72. Shadows in the Dark. The facility was exactly as Peter had described, secluded, guarded, and eerily quiet. I parked the car a few hundred yards from the entrance, hidden among the trees, and began the trek on foot. The sounds of the night, the rustling of leaves, the occasional hoot of an owl, felt distant compared to the rush of adrenaline that coursed through my veins. I'd been in dangerous situations before, but this felt different. This was personal. I reached the outer perimeter, the tall fence looming before me, electrified and imposing. A guard tower stood on one corner, its searchlight sweeping across the ground in an almost mechanical rhythm. The gap between the flashes was brief, just enough time for me to slip past undetected. I crouched low, moving swiftly through the shadows, and within minutes, I reached the fence. My heart pounded in my chest as I pried open the small hole I'd been briefed on, just large enough to squeeze through. I'd done my homework. The guards wouldn't come this way. My fingers grazed the cold metal of the fence as I slipped through, my heart racing. The hardest part was done. Now, I had to find the file. Chapter 73. The vault, the building, was a squat industrial structure, its walls thick with security measures. Cameras tracked my every move, and the occasional buzz of a distant door being unlocked sent a shiver down my spine. I moved quickly, but carefully, slipping through corridors and ducking into doorways whenever a guard passed by. I didn't have much time. They'd eventually notice the hole in the fence, and when they did, it would be all over. I found the entrance to the facility's basement, where the file was rumored to be kept. in a locked room tucked away in the far corner of the building. My fingers worked quickly over the lock, my breath shallow, my nerves on edge. The click of the lock was like a thunderclap in the silence, and I stepped inside. The vault was just ahead. The room was sterile, quiet, everything I'd expected. But as I neared the vault door, I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. There was something off, something wrong. I didn't have the luxury of second-guessing myself, though. I had a job to do. I opened the vault with the set of codes Peter's team had provided, the door swinging open with a soft hiss. Inside, amidst stacks of papers and files, I spotted the dossier, the file that could end it all. The one thing I'd risked everything for. I grabbed it, tucking it under my arm. But just as I was about to leave, the hairs on the back of my neck prickled again. This time, it wasn't a feeling. A voice echoed from the darkened hallway behind me. "You didn't think we'd let you walk out, did you?" Chapter 74. The Betrayal. I spun around, my heart lurching. 3 men stood in the doorway, their eyes cold and predatory. They weren't wearing the uniforms of the facility's security team. "Who the hell are you?" I demanded, my hand reaching instinctively for the gun at my side. One of the men stepped forward. He was tall, his face hidden, behind a mask, but I could tell by the way he moved that he was in charge. The darkness enveloped us like a thick blanket, the sudden absence of light both disorienting and strangely comforting. My breath came in shallow gasps as I tried to adjust to the black void, every sound magnified. Footsteps, the scrape of fabric, the rush of air as my opponents moved closer. I could barely make out their outlines, but I could feel them, feel the danger closing in. I took a step back, my fingers clutching the gun with a death grip. The file was still in my hand, pressed tightly against my chest. I couldn't let go of it. This was my bargaining chip, my leverage, my way out. One of the men, one of the 2 still standing, spoke in the dark. "You think you can escape? You're in our world now, James. There's no way out. Not for you. Not for your son." I didn't respond. I couldn't afford to. Silence was my only ally now. I needed to buy time, wait for the right moment. I moved quietly to my left, feeling the rough concrete wall against my fingertips. The men were closing in on me, but they didn't know exactly where I was yet. That was my advantage. I was a shadow, a whisper in the dark. They had underestimated me, and now it was time to turn the tables. Suddenly, I heard a soft scuffling sound behind me, a hiss of breath. Then, without warning, a bright flash of light exploded in the room. I slammed my eyes shut, but it was, too late. My vision burned from the sudden onslaught of brightness, and I was momentarily blinded. I fired instinctively, the gunshot ringing out in the narrow space. A shout, then chaos. The bright light flickered again, casting eerie shadows on the walls. I didn't wait to see who was down. I moved fast, pressing my back against the cold wall, my heart hammering in my chest. Another flash, this one closer. "There he is!" One of the men shouted. I could hear the panic in his voice now. I spun, raised my gun, and fired again, the shot echoing like thunder. The man who'd spoken crumpled to the floor, his body thudding against the concrete with a sickening sound. But there was no time to celebrate. The last man was still out there, somewhere in the pitch-black shadows, just waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was coming next. My gun was still in hand, but my mind was already running through my options. I had to get out of there. I had to survive. The walls closed in on me, and I felt the familiar rush of adrenaline. But this time, it wasn't just about escaping. It was about protecting Noah. I couldn't afford to fail. Chapter 77. The final confrontation. Then I heard it. The scrape of boots on the floor, the soft tap of movement. It was coming from my right. I didn't hesitate. I dove to the side, rolling into a crouch and firing blindly, hoping to hit something, anything. A sharp cry echoed through the room. I'd hit him. I didn't stop to check. I couldn't. I had. No idea if I'd killed him, wounded him, or just grazed him. I only knew that I had one shot at getting out alive, and I wasn't about to waste it. I moved quickly, using the flickering light from the overhead bulbs to navigate. The pain in my side, where I'd been grazed by a bullet during the struggle, was a constant throb, but I gritted my teeth and pushed through it. Every step brought me closer to the exit. There was a door at the far end of the room, a heavy steel exit door with a keypad beside it. My mind raced as I approached it. I didn't have the code. I didn't have time, but I wasn't about to let that stop me. I ran to the door, my gun still in hand. There was a single moment, just one, where I let my instincts take over. I rammed my shoulder into the door with all the force I could muster. The door rattled, but it didn't give. A voice behind me, strained, desperate, spoke through the darkness. "You're not getting away with this, James." I didn't look back. Couldn't. Instead, I turned my attention to the keypad. I had no idea what the code was, but I knew how to break it. I pressed my shoulder into the door, focused, and slammed my foot into the base of the keypad. Sparks flew, and the door groaned on its hinges as the locks finally released. It was my only chance. I burst through the door just as the sound of heavy boots grew louder behind me. The cold night air rushed at me, sharp and freeing. I could taste the freedom now, the hope of getting out, of escaping. I sprinted toward the woods, adrenaline pumping through my veins like fire. My breath came in ragged gasps as I dove between trees, branches clawing at my skin. I couldn't hear anything over the rush of blood in my ears, but I didn't dare stop to look back. I couldn't. I kept running. Chapter 78. A Glimmer of Hope. I made it back to the cabin, breathless, heart pounding. My hands were shaking, my body aching from the ordeal. But I had the file. I had everything, everything that would finally end. This nightmare. Noah was sitting in the same chair where I'd left him, his eyes wide, confused but unscathed. I sat there, staring at the name on the paper, my mind reeling. It felt like the ground beneath me had shifted. The truth was right in front of me now. Everything I had believed about this fight, everything I'd risked, was now tied to this. One name. I leaned back in the chair, my fingers gripping the edge of the file, trying to steady my thoughts. The name. It was the key to understanding it all, the thread that could unravel this tangled web of lies, but it also meant more danger, more enemies. The name on the paper wasn't just some bureaucratic figure hidden behind layers of corporate indifference. No, this was a person who had blood on their hands, someone who had orchestrated everything, and that someone was someone I knew. I swallowed hard, the taste of bitter irony clogging my throat. Lisa's affair, the mysterious workshop, the increasing tension with my family. This wasn't just about infidelity or betrayal. This was part of something much bigger, something far more dangerous. And Lisa? She had been entangled in it all along. No, I thought, not Lisa. But then, why the lies? Why the secrecy? I looked at Noah, sitting so innocently beside me, blissfully, unaware of the storm that was about to crash down on us. It wasn't just my life at risk anymore. It was his too. I forced myself to look away, focusing on the file. I needed to be cold, calculated. This was war, and I had to play it like a game of chess. The name in the file belonged to a man named Victor Hargrave, the very same Victor Hargrave, who had been involved with some of the highest levels of power, a man whose political influence stretched across the nation, whose connections were deep in every dark corner of the world. Victor Hargrave had been involved with the organization. that had been hunting me, hunting us for the last year. He was the one who had sent the killers, the one who had made the calls, the one who had manipulated the situation from behind the scenes. And now he was the one pulling the strings that had led Lisa to do what she did. A wave of anger surged through me, betrayal, heartbreak. It was all there. But this wasn't just personal anymore. This was bigger, much bigger. I didn't have the luxury of unraveling every emotional thread. I had to act. Chapter 80. The Escape Plan. I looked at Noah again, this time seeing the spark of hope in his eyes, the trust that I hadn't completely lost him. The file could wait for a moment. I needed to focus on getting us both out of here, now. I grabbed my phone and dialed Peter's number. The line rang for what felt like an eternity, and just when I thought it might go to voicemail, Peter picked up. "James, what happened? Are you—" His voice cut off as I spoke over him. "Victor Hargrave," I said urgently. "He's the one behind everything. He's been pulling the strings this entire time, and he's tied to Lisa." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could hear Peter breathing heavily. "I thought you were going to be careful with this. This is dangerous, James. Hargrave is not someone you just take down." "I don't have time for careful," I snapped. "I need a way out. Now. They'll be coming for me soon. I don't know how long we have." Peter exhaled slowly. All right. Listen to me. There's a safe house. A few hours. Outside of town. I'll send the coordinates. Get there, and I'll have people waiting for you." "Where's Noah?" His voice softened, but it carried the weight of a father's concern. "He's with me. He's safe. For now. I'll protect him, I swear." The words were out of my mouth before I even thought them through. It was too late to back down. "Good. Get moving, James, and keep the file hidden. Hargrave won't stop until he has it back." I hung up the phone and immediately stood, slipping the file into my jacket and taking a deep breath. The sound of Noah's soft voice broke through the tension. "Dad?" He looked up at me with those innocent eyes. "Stay close," I said, my voice steady. "We're going somewhere safe, but we have to move fast." I grabbed his hand, and we hurried to the back of the cabin. I didn't want to waste any more time. The world outside was closing in, and the stakes were higher than ever. Chapter 81. The Chase Begins. The truck roared to life, its engine echoing in the still night air as we sped down the winding road, the headlights cutting through the darkness. I kept my eyes fixed on the rearview mirror, the paranoia creeping back in. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that they were already tracking us, waiting for the right moment to close in. Noah sat quietly in the passenger seat, his small hands clenched tightly around his seatbelt. His wide eyes looked up at me, his voice barely above a whisper. "Where are we going, Dad?" I forced a smile, glancing at him briefly. "To a place where no one can hurt us. We're almost there." But the lie tasted bitter on my tongue. I knew we weren't safe. Not yet. The silence felt too heavy as I parked the truck in front of the cabin. The trees around us swayed in the wind, casting long, eerie shadows on the ground. My pulse quickened. There was something unsettling about the stillness, like the calm before, a storm that was just about to break. I turned to Noah, whose eyes were wide with uncertainty. The moment I saw that fear in his gaze, I knew I couldn't afford to fail him. Not now, not ever. "Stay close, Noah," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the weight of dread pressing down on me. "We're going inside, and I need you to be as quiet as possible." Noah nodded, his small hands clutching the edges of his seatbelt, his face drawn with the kind of maturity no child should ever have to possess. He was frightened. Who wouldn't be? But there was something in his eyes that told me he trusted me. That trust was everything now. I got out of the truck first, checking the perimeter quickly. The cabin seemed abandoned, but I knew better than to trust appearances. My mind raced as I scanned the trees and the road, every rustling leaf making my heart leap into my throat. I reached into the truck bed and grabbed a bag filled with essentials I'd packed earlier. Things I thought I might need if it came to this. A flashlight, a spare gun, some basic first aid supplies. Every instinct screamed that we had to leave. But we couldn't just run. We needed answers. I motioned for Noah to follow me, and we made our way to the front door. It was locked, but that wasn't surprising. I expected it to be. My eyes flicked over the windows, looking for signs of forced entry, or worse, an ambush. I didn't see anything out of the ordinary, but then again, they were getting better at staying hidden. I pushed the door open, the hinges creaking in protest. Inside, the cabin was as bare as I remembered it from before. Simple, functional. There were no comforts here. Just survival. But now the place felt cold. Empty. I glanced over my shoulder. "Stay here, okay?" Noah didn't say anything. He just nodded, his gaze still lingering on me, silently pleading for assurance that everything was going to be okay. I wished I could give him that, but I couldn't. Not now. I moved cautiously through the cabin, checking each room. Empty. But the uneasy feeling grew. Something was wrong. There was an odd sense of displacement, as if the place wasn't as it should be. I stepped into the kitchen, and there it was, an open drawer, papers scattered across the counter. A half-empty mug sat beside a steaming pot of coffee, as if someone had been here just moments ago. I didn't need to think twice to know that we weren't alone. I reached for the drawer and pulled it open fully, revealing a stack of documents and photographs. My heart skipped a beat as I rifled through them. Among the mundane paperwork was one photograph that made my blood run cold. It was a picture of me, a recent one. I hadn't taken it myself. The caption below the photo read, "The next target, Chapter 84, The Revelation." I slammed the drawer shut, my hands shaking. The walls of the cabin seemed to close in on me as I backed away slowly, a sense of panic threatening to consume me. They knew. They had been watching us all along. A door slammed open behind me, and I spun around, my gun already in hand. But the figure standing in the doorway wasn't one of the killers I had come to expect. It was Peter. He looked disheveled, sweat beading on his forehead, eyes wild with urgency. He was alone. But there was something in his expression that told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't the calm, calculated Peter I had worked with for so long. "James, get out!" "Now," Peter hissed, his voice urgent, low. My heart pounded, harder. "Peter, what's going on?" His eyes darted to the window, then back at me. "They're coming for you, all of you. Hargrave's men are already here. You need to leave. Now. Don't ask questions, just go." I took a step forward, narrowing my eyes. "Why should I trust you?" Peter seemed to falter, as if the question had struck a deeper chord. "Because they're going to kill us all if you don't." His voice was quieter now, a deep weariness settling in. "I've been playing both sides for too long, but this isn't just about you anymore. It's about everyone." The weight of his words hit me like a freight train. What was he talking about? How long had this been going on? Was Peter part of the game from the start, or had something changed? Before I could respond, a faint sound caught my attention. A low hum, like the roar of an engine in the distance. A car. And it was getting closer. "They're here," Peter said, his voice tight with panic. "You have to go. Now." I didn't wait for another word. My eyes found Noah, still standing where I had left him, his face pale but steady. I rushed to him, grabbing his hand and pulling him toward the back of the cabin. We didn't have much time. Victor Hargrave stood there, his presence like a dark cloud over us, suffocating the very air. His smug expression only deepened my anger, but I couldn't afford to lose focus now. Not with Noah beside me. I had to keep him safe no matter what. "Move," I growled, my voice tight with desperation. I pushed Noah behind me, using my body to shield him from the threat looming in front of us. My hand tightened around the grip of my gun, the weight of it both reassuring and heavy. Hargrave didn't seem intimidated. He simply raised an eyebrow, a sly smile curling at the corner of his lips. "Run, James. I know you're tempted. But you know what they say? There's no escaping the truth." He took a step closer, his shoes crunching against the gravel beneath his feet. The shadows of the woods seemed to bend around him, giving him an almost predatory presence. "You think you can outsmart me? The files, the lies, your precious little boy? It's all just a game. And you, my friend, are losing." I could hear the faint sound of sirens in the distance, but they weren't close enough to help. In that moment, I realized there was no cavalry coming. This was it. It was me, Noah, and Hargrave. "You're wrong," I said, taking a deep breath. "You've underestimated me, Hargrave. I don't play by your rules anymore." His eyes flickered. For a moment, just a brief moment of uncertainty, and I knew I had him. He wasn't as in control as he thought. There was a crack in his armor. With a sudden movement, I lunged toward Noah, grabbing him by the arm and pulling him into the trees. We had to move fast. I needed to create a diversion, give us a chance to escape. "Go!" I barked at Peter, who had been standing motionless a few paces behind me, seemingly frozen. Peter blinked as if snapped out of a trance and quickly took cover behind a thick trunk of a nearby oak. "I'll hold him off," I muttered under my breath. Before I could take another step, Hargrave's voice rang out again, sharper this time. "You really think you can escape me? Your little game ends here." I didn't stop running. I couldn't. But I heard the unmistakable sound of gunfire cutting through the air. My body jerked at the sound, my heart racing. I didn't know if the bullet had grazed me or if I dodged it completely, but the pain was there. Burning. At my side. "Noah!" I shouted, pulling my son forward through the underbrush. "Dad!" Noah's voice was barely a whisper, his small hand clutching mine in a death grip. "We're almost there, kiddo," I said. My teeth gritted against the pain. The bleeding from my side was becoming worse, but I couldn't afford to slow down. Not yet. The clearing ahead was growing larger, the road beyond it visible now. We had to reach it. I could feel the cold breath of fear on my neck as I glanced over my shoulder. Hargrave wasn't far behind. He was relentless. Another shot rang out. A bullet skimmed past my ear and I flinched, the sharp whizzing sound still, echoing in my mind. We were almost at the road. I could hear a vehicle approaching. Peter had managed to send out a distress signal. But would it be enough to save us? I pushed Noah harder, my feet scrambling across the uneven terrain, heart pounding, in my chest. And just as we reached the edge of the clearing, I felt it. The unmistakable pressure of a gun's muzzle against the back of my head. Hargrave had caught up. "End of the line, James," he said, his voice smooth, like silk. "You should have known better than to think you could escape this. This game is over." I swallowed, trying to steady my breath. Noah was trembling beside me, but he didn't make a sound. He knew. He knew we were out of options. "Hargrave," I said, my voice low, steady, despite the fear gnawing at my insides. "You don't get it, do you?" His expression faltered for a moment. "What are you talking about?" I could hear, the vehicle now, the faint rumble of an engine in the distance. I knew Peter had sent someone who could make all the difference. But we couldn't rely on them. I had one shot at this. I shifted slightly, using every bit of strength. I had to spin and face Hargrave. In that instant, I drew my gun and aimed it directly at his chest. His eyes went wide with surprise, but he didn't move. "You're bluffing." "No," I said. "I'm not." Everything went still. The air thickened with tension, and for a brief moment, It was just us, Hargrave and me, caught in the eye of this storm. "Put the gun down, James," Hargrave said, his voice cold, composed. "You can't win. This isn't how it ends." I felt my finger tense around the trigger. The vehicle was getting closer, but there was no telling if it would arrive in time. I had to trust Peter's plan. But what if it wasn't enough? Suddenly, a voice echoed from behind us. "Drop the gun, Hargrave." I didn't have time to look, but I knew that voice. Peter. Hargrave turned just as the sound of another gunshot split the air. There was a sharp intake of breath, a moment of hesitation, and then the air was thick with the scent of pine and earth as we made our way through the woods, the truck idling a few hundred yards down the road. Hargrave's body was already out of sight, a grim reminder of just how close we had come to losing everything. I kept a steady hand on Noah's shoulder, the warmth of his small frame grounding me in the chaos that had threatened to consume us. Peter walked ahead, scanning the surroundings with the alertness of someone who knew all too well how quickly things could spiral out of control. We didn't speak much. Words felt unnecessary for now. The gunshot, the fight, the revelation of Peter's true allegiance. It all hung in the air like a fog that refused to lift. As we approached the truck, Peter turned to me. "You know, this doesn't end here. Hargrave was just one part of a much larger puzzle. Whoever's been pulling, the strings behind all of this won't let go so easily." I nodded. "I figured. But at least now we have a shot at it." Noah, who had been quiet for a while, finally spoke up. "What happens next?" I crouched down to his level, my hand resting gently on his. "Next, we figure out who's really behind all this, and we make sure they can't hurt anyone else." Peter glanced back at us, his expression unreadable. "It won't be easy. They're connected, James. All of them. Hargrave was just a pawn. We've been dancing to someone else's tune the whole time." I straightened, meeting Peter's gaze with a determination that felt like fire in my chest. "Then we burn the strings. We go after the real people behind this." The truck engine hummed in the background, but the silence between us felt heavy. It wasn't the comfortable quiet of shared understanding. It was the quiet before the storm. Peter's face softened, just for a second. "I'll help. You've got a lot of ground to cover, and you're going to need every ally you can get." "Thanks," I said, my voice low. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about taking down the system that had made us all pawns in the first place. But I didn't say any more than that. There was no point in offering empty promises. We would need to be careful, strategic. Noah shifted beside me, his small hand in mine. He seemed to understand more than I expected, a child's perceptiveness that came from being thrust into a world he shouldn't have to know. I opened the truck door, ushering Noah into the passenger seat, and Peter slid in beside me. As the truck rumbled to life, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were driving headlong into something much bigger than what we'd just survived. It wasn't over. We weren't free yet. Chapter 88. A Dangerous Game. The road ahead felt endless. As we drove through the winding streets, the world around us seemed too quiet, too calm, like the calm before a greater, more terrifying storm. "What now?" Peter asked, his tone sharper this time, his eyes scanning the road ahead as if expecting an ambush. "I've got a few leads," I said. "People who might know more about Hargrave's connections, his backers, the ones pulling the strings. We need to go deeper, find the ones who orchestrated this mess from the start." Peter's eyes darkened. "You're talking about the ones who haven't been in the spotlight, the ones pulling all the strings behind the scenes?" "Exactly." Peter's jaw tightened, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. "James, if you go down that road, there's no turning back. You'll be stepping into a world where the rules are different, where there's no going back. You might not even survive it." "I don't have a choice," I said, my voice cold and resolute. I have to protect Noah. I've already lost too much. I'm not losing him. Noah, who had been silent, turned his gaze toward me. Dad, you promised. You said we'd be okay. His voice wavered with fear, and for a moment I faltered. I had promised him. I had told him everything would be okay. And now, as I steered us into the unknown, I wasn't sure if I could keep that promise. But I would try. For him. For me. For all the people whose lives had been ruined by people like Hargrave. Yeah, kid, I said, my voice softer. We will. B, just trust me. The truck turned a corner and rolled down an empty stretch of highway. The only sound, the hum of the tires against the asphalt. There was a coldness to the night that made me uneasy, like something was watching us, waiting for the moment we would slip. We need to go to my contact, I said, breaking the silence. Someone who knows more about Hargrave's operation. Someone who's been in the shadows for years. They can give us answers. Peter looked at me for a moment, then nodded. Where? I pulled out a worn map from the glove compartment, tracing a route with my finger. A safe house in the city. It's an old contact from when I was still with the agency. They'll help. They have to. Chapter 89. The Truth Unraveled. The city loomed ahead, its lights flickering like distant stars in the night sky. Riley's presence was a strange comfort, yet it also brought a stark reminder of the past, of the world I had tried to leave behind, a world where deception and danger were as familiar as breathing. But now, it was all coming back to me, piece by piece, and the weight of it hung heavy in the air. Riley closed the door behind us, her eyes scanning the room as if she were watching for movement in the shadows. It felt like an eternity had passed since I had seen her, but her composure, her sharp eyes, nothing about her had changed. You've been busy, Riley said, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. But you're not as invisible as you think. I glanced at Peter, who remained at the door, his posture tense, alert. Noah, still clutching my hand, was pressed against my side. The room smelled of mildew and old paper, the walls bearing the scars of a forgotten time. It was a far cry from the high-rise offices and luxury hotels I had once been accustomed to. Riley, I need your help, I said, my voice quiet but resolute. We're up against something much bigger than Hargrave. We need to know who's pulling the strings, who's behind everything. Riley studied me for a long moment before nodding, her eyes softening ever so slightly. I know you're in deep. I've been tracking this for a while, James. Hargrave was just the tip of the iceberg. She motioned for us to sit. We took a seat at the small, cluttered table, where a map of the city, old photos and papers were spread out. She tapped the edge of a folder in front of her. Whoever's behind all this isn't just some small-time operator, she continued. This goes way beyond anything you've dealt with. And I've got reason to believe that the people pulling the strings have ties to the highest levels of government, big corporations, and, if you can believe it, some of your old colleagues. I stared at her, disbelief coursing through me. Are you telling me that the people behind Hargrave are part of my world? The world I left? Riley's eyes darkened. You never really left, James. You just stepped back for a while. They don't let you go that easily. I leaned forward, frustration bubbling up. Then why didn't you warn me? Why keep this from me? Because you wouldn't have believed me. No one ever does until it's too late, she said, her voice steady but filled with something else. Regret, perhaps. You think you've been playing this game? But the truth is, it's been played on you from the start. Every move you made, every lead you followed, it's all been part of their plan. Peter crossed the room, pulling up a chair and sitting across from me. His expression was unreadable, but I could feel his unease. Are you saying that James was always a target? Peter asked, his voice low. Riley nodded. Exactly. But it goes deeper than just him. They wanted him to find the truth. And now that he has, they're closing in. I felt the weight of her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had always thought I was the one in control, the one calling the shots. But now it seemed I was just another pawn on a much larger chessboard. I swallowed hard, trying to process the information. Who are these people, Riley? What do they want with me? With Noah? Riley exhaled slowly, clearly choosing her words with care. They want to control the game, and you're more valuable than you realize, James. The information you've stumbled upon, the files you've been chasing, it's not just about money. It's about power, influence. They want everything. I leaned back in my chair, trying to steady the whirlwind of thoughts racing through my mind. So what now? How do we fight this? Riley's lips curled into a faint smile, but it was far from reassuring. We gather what we can. We uncover their connections, their plans, but we do it carefully. One wrong move and they'll make sure you never see another day. My mind flashed back to all the times I had almost been caught, the close calls that had left me wondering if someone was always watching, always waiting. Now it seemed that suspicion had been justified. I turned to Peter, who was still looking at Riley with wariness in his eyes. Are you with us on this? Peter didn't answer immediately, his gaze shifting between Riley and me. He was clearly weighing the risks, but I knew that after everything that had happened, he didn't have a choice. None of us did. I'm in, Peter finally said, his voice firm. But we need to move fast. The more time we waste, the more likely they'll close ranks. Riley nodded in agreement. Exactly. I've already got eyes on some of their more prominent players. We need to act now, before they realize what's coming. I turned back to the map on the table. There were circles drawn in red, names and addresses scrawled in ink, but none of it made sense yet. It was a puzzle with missing pieces, a game, where the stakes were higher than I had ever imagined. We need to hit them where it hurts. The tension in the safe house was thick enough to cut with a knife. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant siren, every shifting shadow felt amplified in the silence. We were deep in it now, far beyond what I had ever imagined. And I could feel the walls closing in. Noah was asleep in the corner, curled up on a makeshift bed of blankets we had found in the back room. His innocent face was the only source of peace in the chaos, and it kept me grounded. Every decision, every risk we were taking was for him. Riley sat at the table, her fingers flying over a laptop, her focus sharp, almost relentless. Peter was, pacing by the window, keeping watch. His unease was palpable, but we all understood the stakes. We were on borrowed time. I sat across from Riley, scanning the files we had pulled from Hargrave's private server. It was a mess, disjointed, cryptic, but the patterns were starting to emerge. There were connections I hadn't anticipated, names I knew, people from my old life, allies I thought I could trust. And then there were new players, ghosts in the system, faceless but powerful. Riley, I said, breaking the silence. This is bigger than we thought. These names, these people, they're not just part of Hargrave's operation. They're tied into global interests, covert military contracts, intelligence networks. Whoever's orchestrating this has power that goes beyond anything I've ever dealt with. Riley glanced up, her eyes narrowing. You're starting to see the full picture, James. This isn't just about money or politics. This is about control. They've been using you as a pawn because they knew you had the skills to track down their secrets. But now that you're getting closer to the truth, they'll do whatever it takes to silence you. I clenched my fists, frustration building. So what now? We just wait until they come for us? Riley's lips twisted into a grim smile. We don't wait. We hit them first. I raised an eyebrow. How? We're already operating with one foot in the grave. We make them believe they're winning, she replied, her voice calm and calculating. We set a trap. We leak just enough of this information to draw them out. Make them think we're playing their game. Then we strike, fast and hard. Peter stopped pacing and turned to face us. You're talking about a public leak, aren't you? A controlled release of information that would make them think we're too exposed to be a threat. Riley nodded. Exactly. It will rattle them. The more they think we're on the edge of revealing everything, the more they'll scramble to cover their tracks. I frowned. And what about Noah? We can't just throw him into the fire like this, not when the stakes are this high. Riley's expression softened for a moment. We'll keep him out of it. I've got a few contacts who can help. With that, he'll be safe, but I knew better. No one was ever truly safe in a game like this. Chapter 93. The Art of Deception. We set the plan into motion the next day. Riley worked her contacts tirelessly, making sure the leak was timed perfectly. We fed select pieces of information to trusted journalists, individuals we knew wouldn't hesitate to blow the whistle on the corruption if it meant breaking the biggest story of their careers. It felt dangerous, reckless, but I couldn't see another way. Every hour we spent in hiding, every moment we delayed, brought us one step closer to the inevitable, and I wouldn't let them win. The first hint of our plan's success came when we saw the headlines flashing across the screen, late that night. Shadow networks, uncovering government and corporate corruption on a global scale. The stories broke like wildfire. One journalist after another began digging deeper, fueled by the tantalizing crumbs we had left. The web we had started to spin was growing, and the pieces were falling into place, but there was a dark side to our success. We could feel the shift, the sudden change in the air, like a predator sensing its prey. The deeper we went, the more aggressive their response became. A few hours after the first wave of articles hit, I received a call. The voice on the other end was cold, calculated, with an edge of amusement. You really think you can win this, James? That leaking some information will stop us? I gripped the phone tighter, my pulse quickening. Who is this? You already know. But if you don't want this to go any further, if you don't want your little boy to suffer, then you'd better stop. Stop now, and we'll forget all about it. My blood ran cold, but I didn't flinch. You're making a mistake. I'm not stopping. And neither am I stopping for Noah. The voice laughed, dark and humorless. You think you're in control here? You have no idea who you're dealing with. You'll regret this. The call ended abruptly, and I stared at the phone for a moment, my mind racing. They know. They're onto us. Peter, who had been standing nearby, stepped forward. We knew this wouldn't be easy. The air in the room felt like it was closing in around us. Every breath was heavier than the last. Michael Trent. The name echoed in my mind, a dark reminder of a past I thought I had left behind. A trusted ally, at least that's what I had believed. Now, the revelation hit harder than I expected. Riley's gaze never wavered from me as she processed what I'd just said. Her fingers hovered above the laptop keys, still poised but unsure of what to do next. You need to be sure before you make a move, James. If Trent's the leak, he's a dangerous man to cross. He's been in this game for far too long. I nodded. I know. I've worked with him. He's ruthless. But I never thought he'd betray me. Peter stepped forward, his expression hardening. We can't waste time second-guessing ourselves. If he's involved, he's already made his choice. We need to find him before he makes his next move. Noah stirred in the corner, his small figure shifting beneath the blanket, but he remained asleep. The sight of him, innocent and unaware, was a constant reminder of what was at stake. It wasn't just my life that hung in the balance now. It was his. I grabbed my jacket, the familiar weight of it a strange comfort. Riley, where is he? Do you have a location? She hesitated for a moment, then typed quickly on her laptop. Her eyes scanned the screen as if she were reading a secret language. I've got an old address for him, a place he used to frequent before he went underground. But if he's involved, it could be a trap. I took a deep breath, the cold air filling my lungs. A trap or not, we can't afford to wait. He's the key to everything. If we find him, we'll know exactly who else is behind this. Riley nodded, her expression unreadable. We go in quietly. If it's a trap, we'll deal with it. But if I'm wrong, we walk away, I interrupted. But if I'm right, we'll have everything we need. Chapter 96. The Hunt. The location was a dilapidated warehouse on the outskirts of the city, a place I had known in my previous life, a ghost of my former operations. I wasn't surprised. Trent had always been drawn to places like this, where the lines between the criminal underworld and the shadows of the city blurred. As we drove through the streets, the city lights cast long shadows against the buildings, and I could feel the weight of every turn. Riley and Peter flanked me in the back seat, their presence a silent but reassuring strength. But inside, I was a mixture of anger and uncertainty. Was I right about Trent? Or had the years twisted my memories? We pulled up to the warehouse, the large metal doors standing like silent sentinels in the dark. It was too quiet, too still. I motioned for Peter to stay back as I approached the entrance. Riley followed close behind, her movements fluid, instinctive, years of experience guiding her steps. I took one last look around. Nothing. No signs of a trap. But something in the pit of my stomach told me that the calmness was just a facade that hid the storm waiting to hit. Riley crouched down beside the door, inspecting the lock. "It's been tampered with," she whispered, her eyes meeting mine. "They know we're here." I nodded. The door creaked open, and we stepped inside, our footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. The air was musty, thick with the scent of rust and decay. We moved quietly, checking every corner, every shadow. The silence was unnerving. I had been in worse places, but something about this one felt off, wrong in a way I couldn't put my finger on. And then, from the shadows ahead, a figure stepped into view. A familiar figure, Michael Trent. He was leaning casually against a steel pillar, a smirk on his face that made my blood boil. He hadn't changed much, still the same sharp features, the same cold eyes that looked at me as if I were a mere inconvenience. But there was something different now. Something darker, more dangerous in the way he moved. "James," he said, his voice low, almost mocking. "I see you've come looking for answers." I didn't flinch. "I came to ask you one question, Trent. Who are you working for?" He chuckled, a cold, hollow sound that echoed through the empty warehouse. "You're still playing this game, huh? You still think you're in control?" I took a step forward, my fists clenched. "Answer me." Trent's smile widened. "You think you've got all the pieces, but you don't, James. You've been played from the start. You think you're fighting for your son for some sense of justice, but it's all just smoke and mirrors. There's no winning this." His words hit like a slap. "What are you talking about?" "You really didn't see it, did you?" Trent said, stepping forward, his eyes gleaming with amusement. "It was never about you or your little investigation. You were just a tool. A useful one, but now you're a liability." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my thoughts. "Who's behind all of this? Who's pulling the strings?"